Let's move on to our featured guest speaker. Once again, it's one thing to say that I'm going to do something about something that's not good. It's another thing to be leading the charge. Tonight we have with us a gentleman who runs an organization that's dedicated toward making sure that people like Gavin Newsom have a tough time of it. Tonight, I'm hoping that we can find out how all of us will be involved in throwing a monkey wrench into what he's doing. And the process of throwing a monkey wrench into what he's doing there will also maybe give him a nice spanking, and he won't get elected, moved up to the chain in the election cycle. Would you please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Brandon Combs, Firearms Policy.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Thanks for showing up. It's a great crowd. Thank you very much for having me here tonight. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what's going on in the future here with this Gavin Newsom ballot prop. I think that's what everybody wants to know, what's going on with Gavin Newsom's issue, right? We've talked about bills for years, but what's going on here? So this is probably the most dangerous threat to Second Amendment rights in California for at least 2 or 3 decades, perhaps longer depending on how you measure that. So what's happening is our Lieutenant Governor is personally sponsoring a ballot initiative that he calls the Safety for All Act. We know that's not what it is, but they like propaganda. So what is it? It's a declaration of war against you and your rights. I don't think I can make it any more simple than that. So what is he going to do? He's going to go to the ballot box in 2016. So from a strategic perspective, it's kind of brilliant, actually, to give them credit. If I were on their side, this is exactly what I would do. There are going to be more people that show up to vote in 2016 than in the last election. Frankly, California, the environment, the political environment is pretty good for them. So what they're doing to set it up is pretty brilliant. However, this is a twofer for Gavin. He's running for governor, right? So let's back up a step. The Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, does not seem terribly interested in following up Heller and McDonald with other cases. Perhaps they will. There's some really good cases coming up. But so far, the U.S. Supreme Court has kind of said, you know, we're not going to weigh in again. That's a problem, especially for folks here in California, Illinois, Maryland, and so forth. And the lower courts are threading needles, with few exceptions, might agree with me on this, is not going as fast or as in the manner that we thought it would following Heller and McDonald. I think that we thought we had 2 very strong opinions that came out of the U.S. Supreme Court that had teeth. The lower courts have ignored it, and the U.S. Supreme Court seems to be okay with letting them do that. That puts us back into the realm of, well, if we can't lean on the courts, we're back into the policy and politics arena. So here in California over the past few years, with some exceptions, but not very many, we've been able to beat virtually all gun control bills that were material. What I mean by that is, yes, we've suffered some losses, but if you think about what's passed and been signed into law versus the over 100 bills that went through the legislature and some of them onto the governor, we are in far better shape than many of our brethren our brothers and sisters in other states, including Colorado. So even here in California, we've had a significant and strong net positive effect. If you're playing defensive ball, I think that we've done fairly well. Not perfect, but fairly well. So that's exactly why Gavin Newsom is going to go to the polls. It's easier for them to take this issue to the voters, put a line item on it that says, do you want to protect puppies and kittens? What do you think the voters are going to do, right? So it's easier for him to go around the legislative process where the truth has to be talked about. Now, they may pass the bill anyway, But it's our job to make them at least hear it. It's on the record, it's on camera. You are going to hear the truth when we show up. You want to pass the bill, you want to sign the bill, that's where we hire Dawn, and we'll deal with that later. But in any case, so voters can be all too easily influenced by really big propaganda pieces paid for by Gavin Newsom and his friends, Michael Bloomberg, Hillary Clinton, those folks. In fact, Gavin Newsom's PAC for this issue just received its first $10,000 donor from the Getty, one of the members of the Getty family. There's going to be big money here. I'll get a little bit more into that later, but there is going to be a lot of money in this campaign. Governor Brown's pretty well locked Gavin in the basement since he's been in the Capitol. And so I know a lot of folks, I was just talking to at GRPC to the audience there, and I said, you know, Governor Brown's the best Republican California's had in 20 years. And so if you really look at his policy, ignoring the train and all kinds of other stuff, if you really look at what Governor Brown has done here in terms of firearms policy, he hasn't been bad for us. It's been great, but neither was Schwarzenegger, right? So Gavin Newsom is a really, really far-left progressive elitist from San Francisco. That is not who Governor Brown is. And he does not want that type of personality, you know, opening his mouth in his administration. So Gavin was the mayor of San Francisco, had kind of a platform, ran for lieutenant governor, which is frankly the most useless office, constitutional office that we have that does nothing. So what has he done these past 4 or 5 years? He's got nothing to run on. He wants to be governor, but he has no issue. Nobody knows who he is unless you're from the Bay. Because what has he done, right? What has he talked about? So anyway, so that he needs something, a leverage point to run for governor in 2018. He has a PAC set up for it. He's actively campaigning for it. That's his goal, is to run for governor. And so what does he need? He needs an issue. Unfortunately, the issue that he chose is us, our Second Amendment rights, our property rights, our privacy. That's what's at stake here. He's going to climb into the governor's office on your back, if we let him. So welcome to the Newsom nightmare. So Newsom's Safety for All Act, what does it do? Well, first of all, it's a ballot initiative, and I think that's an important point because it's quite different. We'll get into a little bit more of the policy versus politics stuff in a minute, but it's a ballot initiative and it's not a bill. It's not going to go through the legislative process. It was apparently authored in part by the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence up in San Francisco. I also sometimes refer to them as the Constitutional Con Artists, formerly known as LCAV. Gavin's initiative is really just a cobbled together collection of bills that we've killed over the past few years. And there's some fluff in there thrown in to protect Attorney General Kamala Harris for her run for U.S. Senate. When he came out with his idea, he said, hey, here's the fact sheet, here's the bullet points, here's what we're going to do. What actually went in terms of language at the Attorney General's office, first of all, took well over a week after more than he said it was going to take. So why the stall at the Attorney General's office? And why is there all this fluff about the APS, the Armed Prohibited Person System, that wasn't supposed to be there? It definitely looks different than what he pitched. I think, personally, the Attorney General said, I'm running for Senate, and I don't want my opponent to talk about my failures, get it out of this ballot initiative. So I think it was politics there. But in any case, so what is the bill made up of? Well, if you think back over the past few years, you remember, who here remembers Senate Bill 53, Kevin DeLeon, Senator DeLeon's ammo bill? Anybody remember that? What do you think's in this thing? How about Senate Bill 396, magazines? Then it turned into something else altogether because we killed it in the ledge. But that's in here, right? Senate Bill 299, lost or stolen reporting, right? All they did was go back and say, what didn't pass? And what is the real next step? What's the next level gun control for California? We are the model for everybody else. What can we get away with? What's not in here? Does anybody have an idea of what issue, what did they not do in this massive ballot initiative?
All right.
What's that?
All right.
Well, that's true. It certainly ignores and goes to undermine our rights. But what is one thing they didn't try to ban in this ballot initiative? Directly.
Democrats.
That as well. But they didn't actually, what they didn't do is they didn't put a firearm directly, they didn't put a firearm ban in the ballot initiative. Why wouldn't they do that? If they were going to go for it, if you're going to go for this massive change in the law, why wouldn't you just go all the way?
Constitutionally, they can't shut down this.
Well, exactly. Not only would it be a bridge too far from a constitutional law perspective, but even from an optics perspective, the average California voter might be inclined to go here, but not that far. So they was, like I said before, I mean, it was fairly brilliant in the way they packaged this up. They're going all the way up to something that will effectively work as a gun ban, without actually saying that there's a gun ban. It takes the opportunity for us to say that it's a gun ban away. We know it's a gun ban, but the average person, they don't know what the net effect is on our rights, because the average person is not us. That's the problem. That's the difference between policy and politics. We'll get into that in a second. But these are bills, this thing is made up of bills that were so nonsensical and so extreme that not even a Democratic supermajority in the legislature, and not even Governor Brown, would give it the okay. These things are so bad that even the legislature and Governor Brown said, nope, can't do this. This is too far. So in any case, Newsom repackaged these bills. And so what are we up against in this if it passes? Well, you've got a mandatory $50 DOJ ammunition purchase permit. If you want to buy ammunition, you got to wait a month, give the Attorney General, whoever that is, $50. Maybe you get it. How many people here have had a DROS delay or know of somebody who's had a DROS delay since they've been changing all of that around? I see some hands. What do you think is going to happen when 1 million Californians send in their DOJ ammunition purchase permit form? How long is that going to take? Do you think that the DOJ is going to get you a license in 30 days? Can DOJ do anything in 30 days? It creates licensed ammunition vendors that will probably cut the number of ammunition retailers. Right now you go to the bait and tackle store on your way up the hill or way to the range, and if they sell ammo, you can buy ammo there, right? Those are all going to go away. The number of firearm ammunition retailers are going to be slashed to probably 10 or 20% of what's out there today. Because not only is it going to be a license that most of these folks are not going to be able to get or want to deal with, but even dealers are going to give up because of a lot of other burdensome things. Storage, so criminalizing transfer of ammunition to private parties, person to person. You want to give somebody ammunition, not anymore. Can't do it. And again, this also applies to law enforcement. Criminalizes the direct receipt of ammunition purchased online by mail or catalog. So even if you have your $50 DOJ permit that says you can buy ammunition because you're special, in fact, you're so special, even though you just bought a gun and went through a background check, you got another license and another license on top of that. So you got your $50 special snowflake DOJ ammunition purchase permit card. You still can't buy ammo online. You have to transfer that. You have to buy it if you're going to buy it. It has to go to a licensed ammunition dealer, and then you have to go do the same transfer process as a firearm.
Well, how would they know if you already have, say, some doubt that you didn't go to?
You have now.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
If they checked on you and you had, say, so much of ammunition, They said, where's your receipt? Well, most of us don't keep receipts for that, what we have now.
Well, these seem to apply prospectively, right? So they're not going to go back. Well, at least at this point, this ballot initiative language would not say, if you already have ammunition, then you have to register it. But that's a good point. It does create an ammunition and cartridge registration program. Every cartridge that passes through California licensed ammunition dealers will be registered to you. There's been a crime in your neighborhood, and we saw that you just bought some 9mm last week. Can we take a look around? What's your next call? Mr. Kilmer? So when DOJ does virtually nothing right, and all of their databases are trash, and they have admitted it, why would they create another database? Ask Gavin. I see a hand.
Yeah, was it Maryland just a couple weeks ago decided to kill its ammunition record law after 27 years without a single crime assault?
Right, that was the ballistic fingerprint law that they had set up, and they did get rid of it after spending tons of money because it doesn't work. Just like microstamping that doesn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the list of gun control laws that don't work, that are just dumb. You know, how long is it? I don't know, how many pages is the penal code, chapter 6. But I mean, what we're up against here are significant challenges. If this passes, how many people are going to be there to sell you ammunition tomorrow? Sir?
Does this apply to Democrats?
As far as I know, it would apply to everybody.
They don't
I guess if you're a senator from San Francisco, perhaps you would find other alternative means. I don't know. But
How about if you were the governor?
well, I would imagine it would apply to Governor Brown as well,
No, not Governor Brown.
or Governor Newsom. So obviously, the other thing we're talking about here is not only is access going to go down, ammo prices are going to go up. How many dealers are going to have locked storage? By the way, all of their employees are going to have a certificate of eligibility. They're going to have to personally take boxes, cases of ammunition out of a locking container, hand it to you for inspection, and then take it back from you and put it back. That moment, that exact moment, just for you to look at ammunition. How many dealers are going to want to deal with that? From a business perspective, that can the market bear it? That's part of what all this is about, isn't it? Driving the cost, reducing access, making things so burdensome that you can't possibly do it with anything that would be considered freedom.
What about poor Democrats?
That would be actually something we would talk about in terms of litigation. But yes, you're right. So the other thing to keep in mind about all of these things, there is no preemption clause. There is no preemption. They're going to pass, if this passes, if this goes into law, it is going to apply to everybody in the state of California. Anybody who visits California, how about 3-gun shooters or anybody else that comes into the state? We have a lot of big matches. Sacramento Valley, it's huge. I think it's the largest IDPA club in the United States. There's all kinds of shooting competitions that happen in California. What are going to happen to the people that come here to compete and train? Yeah, I know right now there's a lot of competitors that bring large capacity magazines with them. Perhaps they live here, whatever. I know there's a lot of law enforcement officers that may be competing with large capacity magazines. Maybe not. Oh, by the way, did I fail to mention, this is a total and complete confiscatory ban on large capacity, what we would call standard capacity, magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. No more grandfathered mags. This applies to law enforcement. This is Sunnyvale, but statewide and worse.
So if you have one grandfathered in, are you obliged to, turn in, get a receipt type of thing?
Under the program, you could. I don't know whether they're obligated to give you a property receipt, that would be something that you'd probably have to wait and see in terms of if they pass regulations saying, you know, turn it into a police station or to a sheriff's office or mail them in, I don't know. Because it doesn't give you an exact process. They let DOJ and the Attorney General's office come up with the little fine print rules after the fact. But yes, I mean, basically your options are lose your property or face criminal and civil liability.
Convert. Or convert it to a 10-round.
Well, perhaps you could convert, but at the same time, is it or is it not? I mean, how do you show a prosecutor that it's not a large capacity magazine? It was a large capacity magazine. The fact that it only holds 10 rounds now, I mean, I think that would be something you could bring up at perhaps trial or pre-trial, and Don would be the guy to call for that. But that's, you know, hundreds of dollars an hour, and maybe you're right, and maybe you're not. Can you get 12 people to agree with you?
Democrat.
These are not things that are fun. So, in any case, we can go on and on about this. There's like 34 pages of law changes and additions. It's a very, very broad ballot initiative. I'm going to skip past all the rest of it at this point. That we've covered the high points and go right into some other meat and potatoes here. And if I'm talking too much, please somebody raise their hand and tell me that, because there's a lot of material to cover. What is a ballot initiative? As I mentioned earlier, it's not a bill. It's a century-old component of direct democracy that allows any California voter to submit language, pay appropriate fees, and if you can collect the required signatures, you can ask the rest of the voters that show up. And you actually, through the ballot initiative process, you can amend the Constitution. In fact, most of our state's general expenditures are due to voter-passed requirements, voter-passed mandates. This time, it's a statewide official, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, who is seeking higher office, who wants to be governor, and he needs name ID, because nobody knows who he is, right? He's been on CNN once or twice, I think, maybe Bill Maher the other day, but really, who knows who Gavin Newsom is? More people know his ex-wife than him, but we won't get into that. To meet this ballot initiative, we need 50% plus one. So whoever shows up, whoever votes, I'm seeing something.
Yeah, it's a fundraising provision, which means requires a 2/3 vote.
I don't believe that it's going to apply here. So we'll have to wait and see once the fiscal analysis is out and
As
everything
long
else.
as it has a license requirement with a fee attached to it, that is a revenue generating item, and that pushes the 2/3 qualification requirement.
It's
Which
very,
tells me he does not really want this to pass, he's only doing this for publicity.
because remember, rules only apply to the people that the people who make the rules say they apply to. So for example, let me back up and give a little story about the legislative process, right? Legislative process, you're only supposed to have one topic. You're not supposed to gut and amend after it crosses House. There's all these rules about process, right? Anybody ever heard of a rule waiver? Now, they're not formally doing rule waivers, sometimes they do. Often, when the party that has the power makes the rules, they're also the people enforcing the rules. How many rules get enforced? IRS, lowest learner, I don't know. There's a handful of them.
But this is a ballot initiative, not a legislative process.
And if you are willing to litigate that, and in a position to litigate that, should that be true, then you can do that. But you can't just show up at the Attorney General's door and expect her to go to war for you. So let me go a little bit down the line here. Due to the low turnout in prior elections, he needs relatively few signatures to qualify this for the ballot. Signatures cost, because everything in politics is money, signatures cost between $2 and $5 a piece. It depends on where you are, what the issue is, your reliability, etc. How many other ballot initiatives, how many other signatures are being collected. This is going to be a big year. They need about 500,000 signatures to be safe. So this could qualify with about $1.5 million. That's a check from Bloomberg. $1.5 million gets it into a position where you are now the loser walking in. That's all it takes. That's the reason why they're not doing this through the legislature. They're going to the voters. They have the money. They'll spend it. They spent it in Washington State. They just spent a bunch of money in Virginia. Thankfully, they didn't win. They're willing to spend money. $1.5 million to get this issue on the California open seat presidential ballot. I think that that's something that we can expect. They are going to bring in money on this. And if they do, $500,000 to be safe, roughly, they qualify, it's off to the races. So this is going to be a game of politics and not policy. But what does that mean? Policies are things like legislative acts, executive acts, departmental practices, regulations, rules. Alternatively, politics is warfare. The exclusive objective of politics is to shift power from one stakeholder to another, to create, steal, or borrow power, however you need, to move people, and then create outcomes that you want. Wins. In politics, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. So we can't just hire another lobbyist and stick them in Sacramento and say, go for it. We couldn't even pool our money together and hire a top 10 lobby firm, because guess what? That's not who's going to be deciding this. We can't go into the legislature and use relationships to have conversations. There will be no vetting. There will be no transparency. They're going to put up the strongest propaganda campaign they possibly can, using all kinds of misinformation. And guess what? They're going to get away with it. Unless we fight back. Once it qualifies, there's not going to be a way to negotiate with this, to testify, to ask for amendments, or to lobby the governor for a veto. Once this gets into the realm of politics, it's going to come down to who shows up on November 8th, 2016. So what are we up against here? Gavin Newsom, obviously, the proponent, the sponsor, current Lieutenant Governor of California, former San Francisco mayor, a lot of political pals. Newsom doesn't want to be California's next governor. I know he just said that he wants to be, and he does. He wants to be the president of the United States. Gavin Newsom is looking at the presidency, and so are a lot of other people. If Gavin runs the table in 2016, if Gavin wins on this, he will probably be your next governor for 8 years. Do you think that he would veto the bills that Brown did? And if he's California's governor for 8 years, guess who's the front runner for the Dems for the next presidential? We're also up against well-funded grass tops and AstroTurf groups like Law Center, Brady Campaign, Everytown, Moms Demand Action, and so very many others. They have a lot of money. We have the grassroots, we have the people. You're all here tonight because this is a real grassroots cause. They don't have people, but they have money. In policy, grassroots matters. In politics, grassroots has a very specific job, which I'll get into in a second, but our job is to win. It's not to convince people that we're right. We're also up against billionaire social engineering extremists like Mike Bloomberg. Other special interest groups might show up on this thing, depending on how well-funded their PACs are. There's a lot of candidates. They're going to be spending a lot of money on these candidate races. There will be other ballot initiatives that they'll want to weigh in on. If there's money left over, I would fully expect to see teachers and hospitals and all sorts of PACs like that show up against us on this. Perhaps even law enforcement. I know this is probably not very popular, but big lobby law enforcement is the single biggest threat to your gun rights and will remain so until we deal with that. Who are the likely voters that we're going to be dealing with? Well, there's 24 million eligible, roughly speaking. About 18 million are registered. An open seat presidential means that we're going to see a higher voter turnout, somewhere in the lines of 60 to 80% of the registered voters could be showing up in 2016. What's the voter registration stats? Real high level. Dems 2-1 on the GOP. Decline to state, no party preference, independent, will be bigger than the Republican Party by Christmas. So there's that. We don't know how many people that are going to be auto-registered at DMVs are going to show up, how they're going to show up, how they're going to register, and how they're going to vote.
Just so you know, the Catholic dioceses up and down the state of California right now, their goal is to add 600 more thousand people to the voter registration roll, and they're doing it via renters' rights workshops. So you can go ahead and add 600,000 to that number already.
Yeah, I think that's, and we're going to see a lot of that, right? Voter registration, everybody is going to be doing voter registration, get out and vote, because that's, again, that's the game. Who is going to show up and what are they going to vote for or against? In the last general election here in California, voters were older. In fact, it was one of the oldest crowds to have shown up in a while. And it biased very heavily towards white voters, which is interesting, but can we expect that in 2016? I'm not sure. Polling suggests that the DMV is really a wild card, the motor voter law that just passed. That is, nobody really knows, but with an open seat presidential certainly provides incentives for folks that might not show up for a boring election. Because whoever's going to win the U.S. presidency is probably going to be there for 8 years. There's a lot at stake. Let's see, of the likely voters here in California, about 43% are Dems, 32% Republicans, 20% independents. Independents lean about 10% more towards male than female, for whatever it's worth. But Dems are strongly biased towards women. Likely Democratic voters are strongly biased towards women. And another thing to keep in mind, that not all Republicans are going to vote with us, and that means against this ballot initiative, should it show up on the ballot. Republicans are not a safe bet in this state. I'm sure there's a number of Republicans in this room, and so I'm not saying that Republicans are anti-gun. I'm saying that in California, Republicans are not a reliable pro-gun vote. As was said earlier, gun people in general, right, gun rights activists, gun owners, are not a reliable voter. So we have to be careful with our assumptions. And then on to the fight ahead. A little bit about the PAC. Firearms Policy Coalition is a 501c4 nonprofit. We immediately spun off a PAC called the Second Amendment Defense Committee. And so far, it's the only PAC exclusively formed to fight this one single issue. That's all this PAC does, is fight Gavin Newsom's war on you. We told our members about Gavin's gun grab the day before he announced it, thanks to a friend of mine who's a reporter and got a hold of some information. And so we actually reported this story before any of the news services and even Gavin Newsom himself. We launched our PAC 24 hours after his press conference, the Friday after his Thursday press conference. So we were moving before, I think, before anybody expected people to know about the issue. Our PAC counsel and treasurer is a law firm of Bell, McAndrews, and Hilltack, who's a very well-known, I would say, pro-gun law firm in Sacramento. We're very much grassroots, but we're taking this very seriously because it is that serious. That's why we have Bell, and that's why we have this rock-solid infrastructure. We can't make mistakes. As was pointed out earlier, if you make mistakes on campaign finance, you will be fined or go to jail. That's why we can have no mistakes. And in addition to all of those considerations, we actually have to get something done. So, as I discussed earlier, opposing a ballot initiative is not the same as taking on a bill. It's far more difficult, risky, and expensive. It would not be out of the question for an initiative like this to cost upwards of anywhere between $10 and $40 million. It could very easily, depending on the election and how many people really show up and care about it, something like this could cost $40 million on each side. My fear is that historically, the gun rights community, as much as it's stepped up, may not be prepared or willing to go as far as it may need to win. But with that said, we're going to need millions of voters and not thousands.
So is every dollar you spend simply going to go towards just opposing it? Or is every dollar going to be spent opposing it on top of your own ballot initiative against it?
Well, we're not going to run a ballot initiative against it. There's no reason why that would be a good idea.
You have the opportunity, why not, if you're going to spend the money?
I would love
Focus on
to.
the same issue.
Okay, I would love to get to that as soon as I'm done, but there is very, very high risk and low reward there. This is not going, you can't run a dueling ballot initiative on this. You don't have the money for it. You don't have the people for it. So my concern is we need to treat this as a very serious problem, but we also need to be pragmatic about it. Let me pause for a second and say, I actually have a language for a constitutional amendment, a California constitutional amendment that would get rid of the roster and micro-stamping and everything else, carry license reform. Dawn and I, we work on many lawsuits together. I have a lot of language that I'd love to get passed as a bill, as a constitutional amendment, or anything else. But this is politics. Politics needs money and people. Okay? We're not talking about 50,000 people showing up at the legislature with letters. We're talking about millions of people, millions of dollars.
So during their signature collection period, other than trying to get people registered to vote for any donations, what is the path? Because I understand what you were trying to tell Robert earlier today. If you want to do two things, then you've got half the forces for each, whatever your net starting point is. And you've got to reach 50,000 people. So let's just assume we want to focus on one sharp knife edge.
Right.
And that's why I talked about this earlier. What is it that besides organizing people to be ready to contact friends, registration, voter registration, distributors who will do that, and collecting the money, what is, I don't understand the mechanics. I fought the thing at Sunnyvale, there was an initiative there, and that was a matter of reaching enough people to deliver them to the thing. Is there a plan that involves certain tactics and stuff, whether you talk about it here or not? Or are you simply trying to have everybody ready so next year in November they vote the right way? Is there something we do in the middle?
Yes, and it's a great time to actually go through those things here. The first phase of the campaign, that's where we're at right now. This runs through the end of the year. First thing we have to do is set up a legal framework. If you don't have a PAC, you can't spend money on the issue as soon as it goes over the desk at the Attorney General's office. It went over the desk October 27th. So all the way up until October 27th, we could talk about it. And we did. The coalition did. October 27th, if we didn't have the PAC, we could no longer spend that money and talk about that issue without registering as a PAC. FPC will come after you. If you're a private individual, by the way, and you make a large donation, whether it's to fund something as an independent expenditure or to a PAC, you also have reporting requirements as individuals. That's why we have a law firm to help everybody make sure that we're in compliance and you're in compliance, because these things are very serious. Phase one, that's where we're at. We need a PAC. Now we have a PAC. Step two, we need a coalition. I don't mean a little one, I don't mean just little pockets here and there. We need 100,000 volunteers by Jan 1. If we don't show up with something that we can mobilize, this is a non-starter.
100,000 volunteers to do what?
Be prepared to, first step is you have to have them. Once you have them, then you can start doing other things. You can do outreach events, you can do voter registration. By the way, how about driving your neighbor to the polling place and making sure that they understand this initiative's problems, right? If you don't have people, you're not going to be able to do those things.
But does that include the option of those same 100,000 people collecting signatures for a ballot initiative in response?
No, I'm sorry, but there's not a single consultant, there's not a single operative. I mean, if you do this for a living, there's not a single person that would say put up a competing ballot measure. You don't have that much resources right now. Let me pause for a second. Let me just make it very clear, because I feel like perhaps this will help everybody understand where our position is on this. We're going to lose on November 8th, 2016, if you're not focused and you don't show up. You are going to lose. We are walking into this as the underdog. If you want to talk about running a competing ballot prop, then why not run a constitutional amendment? First of all, you don't have time. You don't have time. You don't have time to collect signatures. So the realities of this thing are, you are going to lose your rights and your property if you get distracted, if you don't show up, and if you don't take it seriously. Phase 2.
Can I counter that argument, please?
I would love to do that after, if you would give me a few minutes.
Before the time goes
No,
on.
you're wasting our time. It was I-591 against I-594, and it went down in flames. You're wasting our time.
I don't like watching the enemy exercise all options, and then you tell us to limit our options.
I'm not telling you to limit them. I'm telling you to exercise the options that make sense. So phase 2 will happen starting January 1st. Once you have your infrastructure, that's when you start going out. You need to do voter registration, right? We need well over 1 million people to show up. 1 million new people. How do we know who's a voter right now? Are we asking our friends, our family?
Pay for the tapes and check.
Exactly, right? You pay for the voter registration data, you do your research, and then you can target those people. You can target them with door-to-doors. You can canvass neighborhoods. If you have people, you can walk. How about door hangers? If we want to treat this seriously, then you really need to take it that seriously. If we have 100,000 people, we can do a lot of work. 10,000 people across the state of California is not going to get it done. Second thing we have to do starting in January is we really need to be aware that, first of all, every penny going into this thing matters. Every penny does help. The other side is going to write checks for $10, $20, $50, $100,000, maybe more at a time. We don't have a George Soros or a Mike Bloomberg or a Paul Allen or a Bill Gates, which funded 591, 594, with Gottlieb on the other side doing the best he could. The grassroots alone is not going to be able to beat something that's political, that's heavily funded. This is politics, not policy. Phases 3, 4, and 5 run from April to the election day. By the way, on election day, if we don't have enough money and people to have buses driving people to voting places, we're in trouble. If our people are not driving their neighbors to the polls to vote, we're in trouble. Not just on this ballot initiative, how about the presidency? Circuit court selections, so forth. One thing I want to make clear here is that right now, this is a ground game for us. We are in control of this issue. We told Gavin that we were going to take him on. We have. Everybody's here. We're showing up ready to fight. When it's April, May, June, July, August of next year, we're not going to be talking about gun rights anymore. We will internally. But at that point, A, hopefully we have the money to do it, but B, what we really need to be doing is going to that independent, the declined estates, the new voters that we're registering, and reaching out to them.
The guy that just bought a new gun, a first gun.
Or maybe there are many other demographics, and we can get into those later on down the line. But yes, tactically speaking, the people that we really want to bring to the polls are probably not those. I should say, the people that we want to reach are not those people that are already here. In August, September, October, we need to be reaching people that we don't know.
You talk about bringing them to Gavin, right? And I can guarantee you right now, I'm on Facebook and I friended his Facebook account. And he is putting tons of misinformation out on a daily basis. And there's no organized response. Come back, and point out his lies to people on his own Facebook. So everybody that friends his Facebook, not everybody, but the majority, which is over 150,000 people right now, it could be a quarter or half million by the time the election comes around, is going to start believing his lies. Is there no organized effort from your end to go in and respond to his lies on a daily basis, to his Facebook and other social media?
Well, first of all, there's a great grassroots. I mean, one thing that's amazing about our culture is our people care. We're also more informed than they are. So when something happens where he puts out misinformation, there's 1,000 comments in 2 days pointing out how flawed it is and why. And we cite our sources, they don't. So we're already sort of doing that just from a grassroots. We don't necessarily need to organize that. What we do need to organize is to make sure that, no, first of all, likely voters that we care about are not reading his Facebook page. The likely voters that we need to care about, we can only reach through other media. His Facebook page goes to his followers, people that like him, or people that don't, that want to comment on his misinformation. Neither of those segments are people that we necessarily need to put a lot of energy into.
Yeah, basically both sides run their own program. The bottom line for us is numbers, and two things. First, if I remember correctly, on the AB 962 thing, you guys had a Google Docs database of 30,000 locations in the state, something like that, but they said, come sign at my house. Did we run the distribution list on that? So, the numbers of health, you talked about 100,000, which was the number you have here. Basically, if you looked at it, and each of us brought 10 people registered to vote times 100,000, we got the million. So it's a doable chunk if we get enough people started on it.
Right.
They're gonna get it, but I mean, yeah, I understand. You can spend, well, like Robert to walk out of here, he wanted to do something to feel better about it. But the bottom line is, if we deliver voters, we always win. And you spend a lot of time shaking your tail looking at the other guys, what they're doing. But like the guy said, you know, there's nobody objecting to it. That's their own people. But we need the numbers. And that's been our biggest, weakest problem for 25 years I've been doing this. So it's a number to be reached. We need 2 million people. That's 20 registered voters per person with 100,000. That means we can actually do it as easy as we do a city council race that needs 3,000 votes. But you do have to get signed up. You have to be ready to go. The website's got to run. This is a real deal. We don't think about it, but bottom line is that each one of us could turn 20 people between now and the voter registration deadline for next November will win. So getting bogged down watching these guys doesn't matter because they will never generate that many people. The problem in this state with 38 million people, less than 5 million votes. Okay? So all we have to do is punch 20% up at 6 million and we don't mistake. So that's, you know, I understand all the other things, but if you open the book today, kept it with you all day long and had it looked at, and by the end of 6 months, you accomplished 20 million registered voters, and we all did that, we would win. And it's simple and digestible, something you do. Every gun probably influences 25 people. I was at a gun range today, teaching some customers. Half the people in that place were subjectly not, including the employees of the owner, were unaware of this. How can you not be aware of, you know, ammunition registration and waiting periods, and yet they didn't know about it? So word of mouth, if you take the time to do it, and get them registered, and that's the trick. Now that you got the technology of the smartphone, make sure that's all it takes to me.
Okay. Let me ask everybody to hold their question. Let me get through 2 more quick bullets, and then we'll do an open Q&A. You can ask me anything you want. Bottom line in the last phase is going to come down to 3 things. Media, voter contact, and a statewide campaign that's well funded. If you don't have any money, you don't have any real opposition. If you have no opposition, you don't have any real voters. And if you don't have any real voters in 2016, you will not have your rights or property. How can you make a difference? We talked a bit about that. Right now, the only thing we need to be thinking about is people and money. I hate to put it that bluntly, but that's the truth. The truth is, if you have no people and you have no money, you will not win this. We need that. Ask your friends. Ask them to ask their friends. Volunteer. Pitch in. $5, $50, I don't care. I know there's a lot of money here in the Bay Area, and I know there's a lot of really pro-gun money here in the Bay Area. If that does not step up, it is not going to be good for us. A few closing thoughts, just to put some final bullets here on this. Gavin had over $5.4 million in his 2 PAC accounts, not including the initiative PAC account, in June, on June 30th. Anybody know who Reid Hoffman is? CEO of LinkedIn. He just gave Gavin over $28,000. So that's not included in that number. 2016 is going to be a make or break year. And I think it's entirely possible that the future of the Second Amendment, as we believe it to be, is going to turn on who wins the presidency and whether or not California allows this to be the model for gun control 20 years from now everywhere else. I don't believe that the courts are going to allow us complete and utter a total victory in the way that it probably ought to be. That means that we're going to be fighting in the trenches politically and on policy for a long, long time. This is a never-ending thing. It's tiring. Trust me, I know. But we don't get to give up. We were handed something very unique. It's our job to shepherd and protect it. This is not a California problem. This is a national problem. I'd like to close with this quote. And the quote goes, and by the way, as California goes, so goes the rest of the nation. It's inevitable. The door is wide open now. It's going to happen, whether you like it or not. That was spoken by Gavin Newsom.
About marriage.
I don't think that he would make a distinction for this issue, would you?
No.
We're going all in from now until November 8, 2016. Every day, we are going to wake up and live this issue until November 8, 2016. This is the only issue until November 8, 2016. We will either celebrate or we will definitely be looking for legal options on November 9. So, bottom line is we're going to win this if we show up. That is it. You have to show up. You gotta care that much. And so do your friends, so do your family, and everybody else you know. They've got to show up and vote. Thank you, and now I will be happy to take some more questions. Matt?
Keep my people, questions, not statements, not speeches, not your opinion. We're here to get with it. Please, thank you.
Matt?
I think we need to capitalize on this refugee situation. American people are going to be afraid of all of these refugees coming in, and this is a perfect time for us to help people to realize they need protection, they need guns, they need ammunition. And look at the House of Representatives. A lot of the Democrats just went over to insist that we have vetting on these people or stop them or whatever it was. I mean, there is this incredible opportunity that
I think we need to.
foolish.
I think we need to be very judicious with how we approach larger social issues. I'm not saying that there's not an opportunity, but the same opportunity existed yesterday and the day before that, the day before that. Crime has always been there. There's always been risk. I think we need to be careful and stay focused on our goal, and our goal is beating Gavin Newsom's ballot prop on November 8, 2016.
From the 2A perspective, here in California, do you think that there is a benefit or a detriment to being registered as an independent, particularly when it comes to primaries?
At this point, with the top two, it doesn't really make a difference. Voter registration at this point is simply a matter of self-selection and how do you want to feel. There's no practical, mechanical difference in terms of primaries or anything else. If you're looking at optics, I mean, if every Republican decided to go independent, or every independent decided to go Republican, that could be you could read tea leaves and stuff like that. But beyond that, I don't think there would be a value to changing, other than maybe you don't want to get a bunch of mail. Other than that.
I know that sometimes there are certain elections where you can only vote along a party line or something of those sorts, and independents get dropped out from being able to choose at all.
That's really not, in California, that's no longer a thing because of the top two. I mean, you can basically vote just about any time you want for whoever you want, and whoever wins where the top two go on, and that's the runoff, so to speak, in the general. So there's not a real, I wouldn't game the voter registration because it doesn't really get you anything, I don't think.
Doesn't voter registration allow you to vote for party committees in the counties? And affect the makeup of the party committees?
That is a fair point. And so, you know, perhaps if you're interested in getting into the party mechanics and the caucus mechanics, I mean, if we're talking about voting on issues and candidates, then the answer would probably be no. If you want to get into your county committee or the state committee or something like that, yeah, then perhaps there's a value to that because that is your ticket in. So it just depends. If that's where you have an interest in, that's where you want to put energy, then that may be a viable reason, a good reason to go ahead and stay registered as one thing or another.
So, real quick, to this gentleman's point, I actually did register as an independent, strictly so I could vote in the primary against the weaker candidate, and to show a strength and make them actually spend more money and that kind of thing. So I would never say that it's not effective. The second thing is I'm an election clerk.
Well, that's when we had actual primaries. Now we've got to talk to the primary.
I understand that.
That's a change.
Mildly. But the thing is, if you're Republican, registered Republican, you can only vote Republican. So
Not true.
that's the way it was when I was. Okay, fine, and that changed. Fine. The second, real quick.
I'm sorry.
I'm an election clerk. I'm an election clerk, and I've been doing it for 5 years here in Santa Clara County. When we go through different phases on election day, we post the people who have actually mailed in their ballots and people who have not outside the election pieces. So I have yet, not once, seen a Republican come in to my precinct and ask for that ballot.
It's poll watchers.
What?
You're talking about poll watchers.
Poll watching, whatever. Yeah, they've never come in and they've never come down through. I've seen Democrats come in and they literally check off people, and the next person comes in and they check off people. That would be a great way, and I've never seen it once. And I've worked
There's
all over.
a couple of practical
That's what
things.
is 100,000 volunteers.
But there's a couple of practical things there, if I might. First of all, if I have 100,000 people or 200,000 or 300,000 people ready to go, and I don't necessarily want them spending their time checking off things, I want them bringing in new names. I want buses, caravans. I want a line at every polling place. The other thing is, by the way, if you're in a district that's 2-to-1 Dem, and you know what the turnout's probably going to be, if you're a Republican, you're probably not going to check off names, because guess what? You lost before you showed up. I mean, there's a practical economics issue at stake here, and that is how much money can you spend looking at names? Who's going to do that? Sir?
I've also, my wife and I have been poll workers for a while, and I want to go on second this man's suggestion, because if you're looking for last minute, there's nothing better than somebody to come in there, take a look at who hasn't gotten to the polls, take a look at this Republican, get on that phone. It's a fantastic way to get 10 people.
If you're asking about who hasn't voted yet, or I thought you were talking about, okay, I think I see the point better now.
But my question to you is, what arguments, what persuasive techniques, communications techniques you have that you developed to help me to get people that actually may not care one way or the other to come to the poll?
So let's talk about that for a second, because that's a good question. Your job is not to convince the middle ground, right? Our job here as the grassroots is not going to be to get the declining states, maybe even a left-leaning voter that's pro-gun or mildly pro-gun. There's a professional operation that'll happen there. Our job as the grassroots is to make sure that we all show up, right? Personal accountability. How many people do we know? Can we talk to 10 people tomorrow? Can each of us talk to 10 people tomorrow? And can we ask them to talk to 10 people?
My point is, when I talk to those 10 people,
right.
What points do you have for me?
If you're talking to other gun owners, right? We're talking about grassroots. So I assume the people we're talking to are pro-gun. If we're not, then we're talking to the wrong people. This is not the stage of the game where we're talking to neutral parties, because they're going to be listening to television and radio starting in July of next year, and those things are going to tell them that everything that you talked about so long ago that they don't even remember was wrong. The last thing that they hear is going to be what they vote. You don't need to talk to them until August, September. October is when the absentees start rolling out and rolling in, right? That is when you're talking to those folks, and you're talking to those folks about whatever matters to them. For example, if we're talking about a white 60-year-old woman, it might be a different message than a 30-year-old African-American woman. Where do they live? It's not something that you can simply say, here's our talking points. We may have a different talking point in South LA than we would in South Bay, San Francisco, right? It's just different, it depends. Right now, our job is to find 10 pro-gun or mildly pro-gun people, get them registered to vote, and get them invested. If we can't do that, you're not going to get those neutral votes.
2 points. The first one is my gun club. Everybody there wants to do something. They don't know what to do. So where do you point them? What do you tell them?
StopNewsom.com. I need volunteers badly.
Okay.
StopNewsom.com.
The other issue is some friends of mine that have never had any interest in guns whatsoever came to me yesterday and said, I heard that Newsom's trying to outlaw guns. I didn't say no, he isn't doing it, but I said, yeah, he's trying to restrict them. And they said, how do we get a gun? What do we have to do? What classes? All that. And they belong to a big church. And I believe that if I educate them and bring them on board, that they will spread the word throughout the whole church, and that church will tell everybody else down the road.
Build your grassroots network.
But my question is, where do I get information to bring them in the fold to make them part of the 100,000?
Well, again, if we're talking about somebody who is with us, right? They may not be on. They may not be sitting here tonight, but perhaps they're with us in ideology, right? Or maybe they think that this is too far, and maybe they want to help, right? If they're that far, then you can reach them. You can engage them. And that, right now, that is the phase 1 that we're at. All of that information is at stopnewsom.com. If you want to look at what's going on with the ballot prop, we have FAQs, we have all sorts of information like that. We also have over here, we've got tons of flyers and tons of donation remit forms that make sure that everybody complies with the law.
We got a form with the Stop Newsom webpage and donation sheet. Anyone who wants one, raise your hand while he takes the next one.
Is this form an error at the bottom where it says Stop Newcomers? No S.
Yeah.
That must have been a, well,
Newcom.com.
there you go. Look at the other flyer. Apologies.
I don't have a lot of money and I don't have a lot of friends, and all of my friends, most of them do, probably all of them do vote already. Most of my neighbors are well educated and probably liberal. One of my new neighbors is one of the 100 vice presidents for Google. How do I go out and find people that aren't registered now that are likely to be reasonable and vote the way we... I don't want to register people who are too dumb to understand it.
Do you have a favorite gun store or gun range?
I don't get out very much anymore.
Okay, well then perhaps a call tree would be one example of things you could do. Maybe you know a few people that could turn into more, right? It's all a multiplication factor game. So.
I know a handful of people that I regularly deal with.
And those handful of people can turn into 50 or 100 people if you ask them and they show up and do it. 5 people can turn into 50. It takes some time and it takes work because you ask your 5 people, hey, what are the names and telephone numbers of the 5 people that I just asked you to call, right? So you ask 5 people to call 5 people, then you call them and reinforce that, and you start pushing that message down and out. Pretty soon you've got a lot more than you started with.
Ted Kennedy approved immigration law in 1965. Since then, 59 million immigrants have come into this country. Now you go to the DMV, and Obama's allowed them to go get licensed, and inside the form for the license, they are automatically registered to vote. So The DMV says that it's not their responsibility to say whether they're legal or not legal. They just turn them into Berger Street in San Jose.
Well, again, going back to the motor voter laws and the recent amendment to it here in California, we're just going to have to wait and see. We don't have any real data to suggest what it's going to do. Mr. Kilmer.
Any chance to get some of the major retailers involved? I mean, we just got a new Bass Pro Shop over here in San Jose. When you go to check out there, they got a big wall up there. The NRA is a big sponsor of Bass Pro Shop and all the pro hunting organizations. I know normally they like to stay out of politics, but this seems like this going to hit their bottom line. Any chance of getting some help from them? And even if they just let us put, something on their counter or something would help.
My experience with the major retailers is that you will be more effective, or you'll have better luck, for whatever it's worth, at getting your material on the counter by just going in, talking to the manager, maybe to the guy at the firearms counter, whatever you're doing, right? Maybe you go to the fishing department too. My experience is, with our grassroots stuff in the past, is it's better to do that than ask for permission. Because if you ask corporate office for permission, the answer is always going to be no. But if one of you go in with a stack of flyers and say, hey, can we put 50 of these on your counter? This is what's going on, it's really important. Even Walmart's, for that matter, they'll usually let you do it.
I don't know, my point was that it appears that National Rifle Association has a working relationship with Bass Pro Shop, and why can't it come from them?
If you're asking, well, okay, so very generally speaking here, the firearms industry, especially the larger players, it's a very different world. There's a lot of internal politics with that stuff. Could NRA make the ask? I'm sure they could. So could NSSF, I'm sure. And that is a different relationship between the corporate office of Bass Pro and NRA and NSSF. That doesn't necessarily translate to being on the ground or the folks out on the ground, or even for the stores themselves. By the time they make a decision, it will probably be next year. So, obviously the faster we move, the better. If they can do that, I support that. I will tell you that NRA, CRPA, Gun Owners of California, myself, Alan Gottlieb, we are all talking. And so the one thing about this, for whatever it's worth from a gun rights leadership perspective, is that, for the first time in a while, there's real cohesion in gun rights leadership. There's a lot of cohesion here. So to me, that's very positive and allows us to do even more and better things. We're all talking, sharing, communicating, and working together.
How much tax revenue would be lost if ammo sales are restricted?
Not enough for them to care.
So you have these flyers with the website and different information, right? So to me, when I go into a local gun range or a gun shop or whatever, when we're trying to fight these battles, you never see any information on their counters. There are people never talk to you about stuff like that. Mike alluded to the point that he talked to people, or maybe this other gentleman, that they were shooters or they were employees and they had no idea that this was even being considered, right? So I think these need to be at every single gun store in the Bay Area, and then statewide too. So I don't know how much it costs to print one of these, but to me it would be to the gun owner, the gun store's benefit if they actually printed 1,000 of these, and every time they sold something, give it to that customer. Every time they sold a gun, they give it to that customer.
And that's what we need volunteers for, because we've got thousands of flyers that we can give you. And by the way, the messaging is going to change, but we need volunteers to get it out there. We do direct shop drops to stores. Mike?
Very quick comment on the gentleman there. Just so you know, at this point, a number of the dealers and I have been working together to organize the whole area. And I realize if you stand in a gun shop on their side of the counter, every day people come and ask for something. They won't find the owner, they'll come in the business, they'll talk to an employee. So while that all makes sense, we're taking care of that. Okay. So 100 guys walking, I had a store down here, they had a guy who was an activist in Concord show up and piss all over the owner in front of the employees so he wouldn't do something, and I cop came around the corner and saw me, I said, you know what? I know what you belong to, you're operating a Concord. Stop pissing this guy off, get out of here, okay? The stuff will be there. It took 20 years and the loss of 300 to 350 gun stores, and then you get the bravery to stand up and say, hell no. When you talk about going to the big five or whatever, it's the same sort of thing their corporate's going to look at. As much as we're like this, they are businesses in the middle, and they evaluate all the stuff that's there. Of the business left in Barry, only 2 showed us the door. So that's fine, I'm not there. But what I'm saying is, these are all important, but grassroots need to understand. If all you show up in a week, different times like that, they're going to go, the hell with it, get out of here. Or you get a store like the one out in Livermore, where you walk in the door, every damn flyer from every route to the counter is fully diluted. Right. We're trying to do to the stores to get them to have one point of contact information and get them to the message we're working on that. And yes, we can do that. The biggest issue you guys will have an effect is on the group of people you know and gun clubs. Gun clubs right now are very hard to break into. Okay. We lost all the ranges also, so there's a plan. So that's why, as I talked to Brenda earlier tonight, normally I'm asking people with our group, you guys have all heard my little pitch about what we're doing. So we're still holding down the cities and we're responsible for that. They're holding down the state. And so I'm asking all the businesses to make their donations this month to that program and put stuff out there. So it is being done. It's not that it is being done. It's that he isn't the guy that's going to do it. They did about 10 years ago, remember the ballot issue we had a sign for 8962, the ammo thing? And when they did that, because I had access to their news on it, they had 30,000 people across the state that said, if you can't find one anywhere else, come to my house, I got it here to sign it. So what Calvin's does good is distribute the information to volunteers. Your job is to take the 20 people you know that aren't involved somewhere else.
And by the way, you could...
But we're looking at all of it. The point is that the 20 people you need are not 20 stores. They're already here. It's 20 people that got no other contact. When I made that comment about target masters today, the owner wasn't there. But the employees behind the counter, the interface didn't know. Now this is so new. I didn't have these flyers I showed at night. So every time I go somewhere, I explain things to people. Now when I train somebody, I take their street address and say, dude, if something comes up in your town, I'm going to get a hold of you today. You don't want to get my flyers. So we'll get there. But it's your own sphere of influence that makes the difference. Then be ready to reach them. It worked well when they did years ago. I don't think I've ever seen a group organized statewide across the internet and quoting so many volunteers. We just need to move forward with it. We'll do it. We'll be there.
If we work, we can get a lot of things done. And I think over the years we've shown that. One thing that was pointed out earlier is, how do you attract more flies with honey or vinegar, right? If you're going to go into it could be Starbucks, it could be, why don't we have flyers at dry cleaners? Are there no pro-gun dry cleaners, local coffee shops, bookstores? Where do people go? Gas stations? Everywhere that you touch something, that's an opportunity. It won't be an opportunity if you go in and say, if you don't do this, then, right? But if you go in and say, hey, look, this is really important. It's really important to me. It's important to a lot of people. Can we get this out? Can we put this on the counter? Can I tape it to the window, right? People are generally pretty good with that kind of a message. Use your network. Your network is far more powerful than you think. If it wasn't, then why is Zuckerberg making so much money? Your network is very powerful. It takes you to drive it. Be the driver. If you need information, you need help, we have people. We will help you. Call. Write us. We will help you through it. We will turn you into a coordinator. Then we'll turn you into a county leader, and then a regional leader. Never volunteer for anything, right? But here, we need your help. If you need support, we'll support you. You're not out on the edge of the limb by yourself. Ask everybody you know. Talk to your businesses. Talk to everybody. Any other questions? I think this is a very good sign that everybody's tired of hearing me. So thank you very much for your time.